Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Gardner, and I will be facilitating our ESDU course around working with adult learners in a school setting. This video is intended to just acquaint you with our outcomes and set up some background information that you're going to need before we come together for the Zoom session on June 24th. The overall outcomes is where I want us to start. And our main focus is understanding the similarities and differences between pedagogy and andragogy, which is adult learning, and how this helps us shape the learning experiences that we're going to facilitate for our colleagues or for other adult learners. As part of this process, you will hopefully select some andragogical strategies for facilitating adult learning experiences for fellow educators, or if you're among our ESDU faculty, thinking about how you'll facilitate with your candidates in mind. And I'll talk more about that in just a moment. You'll, particularly if you're in the ESDU faculty, you'll have some time to consider the intersection between culturally responsive teaching and andragogy and how that framework can inform your andragogical design. That outcome is primarily for the ESDU folks, but all of us will have the chance to revise and refine course syllabus or course syllabi or PD planning or other work that we might be doing in our roles to build a foundation from adult learning theory. So when we do Zoom together, please be willing to be on camera as much as possible. I'm here in my garage. We're all often working from home. Don't be embarrassed by the setting that you're in. Some people might feel like it's unprofessional to have this. I tried to hang some curtains. It didn't look any better. But we all recognize that we're in a unique situation as co-learners in this environment. And the more you can be on camera and not be worried about that, the better. I'll be in my garage. We'll probably hear traffic go by. I'm only out here because I live in a very small house with a lot of very energetic children. And so we all have our unique circumstances. Part of why I'd like you to be on camera as much as possible is that toggling your camera on and off is something I'm going to be using as a signal for when you are ready for conversation. Your camera might be off when you're doing a reading or doing some independent work, and then the camera will be flipped on to signal that you're ready to have a whole group conversation. Your engagement is appreciated, whether that's through the Zoom chat, through verbal contribution, whatever it might be. And you will be accessing links and files during the conversation that I'll be sharing with you through the chat. So be mindful and maybe plan ahead the tech setup that you think will work best for you to be able to have multiple windows open or to be able to access both the Zoom and the resources I'll be providing. It's not ideal, but it's just a way that we can make it work in these constraints. So I mentioned that there'll be a couple different subgroups of people that'll be working with us. All of us are going to be working, focusing on principles around practicing adult learning and theory and putting that into practice. There will be a subgroup of ESDU course instructors. And for those of you that don't know what ESDU is, ESD 112 has an alternative route to teacher certification program that has been very successful. And the subgroup of you that are affiliated with ESDU are going to have a little bit different task in the third part of our Zoom meeting. The rest of us, we're going to be looking at adult resistance to change, and we'll talk more about that, obviously, when we're together for Zoom. There are two segments for our learning. These are terms that you're probably very familiar with by this point. There's the asynchronous and the synchronous. The asynchronous is where we don't do the work at the same time. The synchronous is where we as a community of learners are pulling together. So I just want to talk through the two segments of that. From the asynchronous side, our goal for all of us is to develop some background schema, some common vocabulary for discussing andragogy and pedagogy. And that's what this video and the associated readings, short readings, will help to do. I also do want you to brainstorm what you bring for our collaborative conversations, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. For you ESDU instructors, you're going to start thinking about some potential connections between andragogical practice, adult learning practice, and culturally responsive teaching in the brain, which is a text that I know the faculty have been focusing on. If you are not part of the ESDU faculty, you don't have to have this book. If you're not familiar with it, it's a great one, but you don't need to have access to it or familiarity with it if you are not one of the ESDU faculty. For our synchronous time together on that Zoom, we're going to focus on processing and making meaning of the context, or excuse me, the content that you're going to be exploring in this video and then in those related readings. My hope is that you're going to experience and be mindful of the adult learning practices that I'll be modeling for you and sharing with you so that you might adapt those for your own instruction. and learning from each other, because we are bringing together a wealth of knowledge that all of you have, that at various degrees of size and shape of leading adult learning. And there's a lot of value in that experience as well. For those of you that are ESDU faculty, you're going to be looking at your syllabus and doing some planning to make some very explicit connections between culturally responsive teaching in the brain and some para-educator partnerships. For those of you who are not part of the ESDU faculty, when they're doing that work, we'll be separating off to think about this concept of learner resistance to change, and how you as a leader of adult learning can coach through that resistance, so that learning and change in professional practice can actually take place. So in order to prepare for our shared learning, one of the things that we know, both in pedagogy and andragogy, is critical, is that we build some sense of community. And with this distance learning and virtual learning through Zoom, that's one of the pieces that is incredibly hard to develop. So as a first step toward that, what I'd like you to do before you arrive at for the Zoom is to just do a brief introduction of yourself in a Padlet. And so you should have received a link to this document, which gives you the kind of preview stuff. And you probably got to this video as a result of a link that will be live here when I'm done recording. But I would like you to visit this Padlet. If you're not familiar with Padlet, it's a pretty simple, straightforward collaboration tool. And so this is where you're going to introduce yourself to the rest of the participants. So it says, take a moment to add your name, current role and school location, a sentence about the nature of your work with adult learners. Short and sweet is great. And so you'll just come down here where there's this little add post. If you don't have a login and your name doesn't automatically show up, please do type your name so that we can associate names with the content that is there. And then just write something that kind of helps to identify a little bit about yourself. So I'm going to cut and paste so that you don't have to watch me type. A little bit about me. I teach English at Hayes Freedom High School in Camas. My adult learning work involves leading, Padlet won't let me undo that. My adult learning work involves leading PD locally, being a new teacher mentor, and I also have a role at OSPI as a framework lead, where I train principals and evaluators on the Marzano instructional framework. I've been doing this work, leading adult learning for, I don't know, probably 12 years at this point. And I also lead variations of this training in person for a variety of school districts and for a variety of contexts. So what I've written there is an example, pretty short and sweet. We want to be able to put a name and a role with the other people that are going to be participating in our Zoom together. So that would be your first little task. The next thing is to review an infographic. And that infographic identifies some research related to adult learning theory. And the most important, though, in addition to the Padlet introduction, is this one-pager, because this content is going to be content we're going to build upon during a core activity together during the Zoom. Last thing I'd like you to notice on this document is please bring or be ready to talk about artifacts or examples illustrating specific methods you use when framing adult learning or facilitating adult learning. I'm focusing on facilitation methods as opposed to tasks. So not so much things you have your adult learners do, but things you do as a facilitator to create a great learning experience for adult learners. These can be tangible ideas, links that you can share if you want, or you can just be prepared to share concepts verbally. And also be ready to do some reflection ahead of time about your own experiences you've had as an adult learner, both positive and negative, because we're going to be using these to build some community as well. Those don't have to be written out, just kind of have those in mind. If you're an ESDU course instructor, there's a couple more nuggets of information there that I'd like you to pay attention to. And then there's an optional, if you're a rabbit hole person and you tend to just click on links and read more documents and watch more videos about things that are interesting to you. If adult learning is interesting to you, there's a link that's a good place to start. So laying that foundation for our community through the introductions on the Padlet is one of the first steps we're going to take. Building that basic schema and vocabulary through the readings. But I also want to take a moment just to articulate that key vocabulary. We're familiar with the concept of pedagogy, the instruction of kids, and the methods and practices associated with that. But we're going to be talking a lot about andragogy. As you've already figured out, that has to do with the instruction of adults, and specifically methods and practices that result in changes in personal and professional behavior and thinking. Slightly different from pedagogy because for kid learning, there's a little bit more of a detachment from the learning itself. Whereas with andragogy, the learning is often very personal, either related to the adult's personal growth or their professional application of work. So that's one of the nuances we're going to discuss as well. Another of the nuances that we're going to probe a little bit is going to be represented in this Venn diagram that we're going to come back to periodically. Pedagogy and andragogy, there's tons of overlap in terms of good practice. They're not completely different universes, but things to think about. For example, when we're working with adults, what does formative or summative assessment look like? What does classroom management look like? And related to that, rules, norms, and consequences. Most of us as classroom teachers have a clear set of how we respond to student misbehavior. How do we respond to adult misbehavior? And if you do enough leading of adult learning, you're going to encounter some adult misbehavior. So we'll take some time to process what that might look like. And then just what does engagement look like? Because it can look very different for adults versus kids. So those are some ideas that we're going to connect with, and you'll get some seeds planted around that when you look at the infographic and that one pager I'd like you to read. So those resources, that's going to be your next step after watching this video. Go back to that Google document, introduce yourself on the Padlet, check out the infographic and the article. And as you're engaging with this stuff, if you have tech difficulty, reach out, let me know. I can send you different links if the links aren't working for you. Or if there's other things that you have questions about, please don't hesitate to connect with me. I'm looking forward to this experience. This is the first time that I've done this particular training via Zoom. Usually it's a 1 or 2 day workshop session conference. It's pretty intense. So I've tried to really focus in on what I think is the most important experiences and knowledge for you. And I'll have tons of resources that I'll be sharing that you'll be able to peruse at your own speed and time based on what you feel like is most useful to you. So like I said, jump into that Padlet, introduce yourself. If you have questions, reach out to me. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help you prepare for the 24th. And I look forward to our time together at 1 o'clock via Zoom on June 24th.